Hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode of English Unpacked. Today, we're taking a trip to the supermarket. Now, I don't know about you, but I had a rather interesting experience at the supermarket just the other day. I was rushing through the aisles trying to grab everything on my list when I accidentally bumped my cart into a display of watermelons. Can you imagine? Watermelons rolling everywhere. Luckily, no one was hurt, and a kind gentleman even helped me gather them. It definitely gave me a good laugh and reminded me that sometimes even the most ordinary trips can have unexpected moments. But whether you have a chaotic adventure like mine or a smooth and peaceful shopping trip, getting groceries is a part of everyday life for most of us. It's where we get the food that keeps us going, from crunchy apples and juicy oranges to creamy milk and freshly baked bread. So, let's imagine ourselves walking into a bustling supermarket. Can you hear the trolleys rolling, the beeping of the scanners, the chatter of shoppers? We grab a trolley, or a shopping cart, as some of you might call it, and head towards the entrance. Now, I always like to start with the produce section. There's something so inviting about all those colourful fruits and vegetables, don't you think? As we wander through the aisles, let's imagine picking up some juicy red apples, perhaps some ripe bananas for breakfast, and a few bright green avocados for toast. Oh, and how about some vibrant carrots and leafy spinach for a healthy salad? Now, speaking of aisles, that's a word we use a lot when talking about supermarkets. An aisle is a long, narrow passageway between shelves or displays in a store. So, you might say, I found the apples in the aisle next to the bananas, or, excuse me, I need to get through this aisle. Can you picture yourself walking down an aisle, surrounded by all sorts of interesting products? Here's a quick quiz. To test your knowledge, can you name 3 different types of fruit you might find in the produce section? Take a moment to think about it. Did you come up with some? Maybe you thought of juicy strawberries or perhaps some exotic mangoes. There are so many delicious options to choose from, and speaking of exotic, have you ever seen a dragon fruit? It's a vibrant pink fruit with white flesh speckled with tiny black seeds. Or how about a Romanesco broccoli? It has a striking green color and a unique spiral pattern. Keep an eye out for these unusual fruits and vegetables on your next shopping trip. Now let's move on from the produce section and explore some other areas of the supermarket. As we venture further, we discover a whole world of different foods and products. We have the bakery, filled with the aroma of fresh bread and pastries. Can you almost smell the warm croissants and crusty loaves? And then there's the deli counter, with its tempting array of cheeses and cold cuts. I always love to see the different varieties of cheese, from creamy brie to sharp cheddar. And of course, we can't forget the dairy aisle, where we can find milk, yogurt, and, my personal favorite, even more cheese. Now imagine you've picked out all the delicious ingredients for a special dinner. You've got your fresh vegetables, your favorite cheese, and maybe even a treat from the bakery. It's time to head to the checkout counter. This is where we unload our trolley, the cashier scans our items, and we pay for our groceries. The checkout counter usually has a conveyor belt that carries our items past a scanner, and then we pack them into bags. Have you ever noticed the little beeping sound the scanner makes as it reads each item? Speaking of checkout counters, did you know that in some countries, supermarkets don't have traditional checkout counters like we do? For example, in some parts of the world, people shop at outdoor markets where they can haggle over prices with the vendors. It's a completely different shopping experience. But before we get too caught up in the checkout process, let's go back to our shopping list. Ah, the shopping list. A true supermarket essential. I always try to make a list before I go shopping, but sometimes, I admit, I forget it at home. And you know what happens then? I end up wandering around aimlessly, trying to remember what I needed and inevitably buying things I don't really need. Just last week, I ended up with a jar of pickled onions, even though no one in my family even likes them. I guess they just looked so interesting there on the shelf. But seriously, a shopping list can be a real lifesaver. It helps you stay organized, stick to your budget, and avoid impulse buys. Plus, it's so satisfying to tick off each item as you go. Do you have any tips for creating a good shopping list? I find it helpful to organize my list by category, like produce, dairy, and pantry staples. Of course, even with the best laid plans, things don't always go smoothly at the supermarket. Have you ever experienced that moment of panic when you can't find an item on your list? Maybe they're out of your favorite cereal, or the bread you wanted is sold out. It can be a bit frustrating, can't it? What do you usually do in those situations? Do you ask a store assistant for help, or choose a different product? Speaking of challenges, let's head back to the checkout counter and see what's happening there. Okay, we're back at the checkout counter, and it looks like there's a bit of a queue today. But that's all right. It gives us a chance to take a breather and observe the process. As we wait our turn, we can see the cashier skillfully scanning each item and placing it into bags. Did you know that those bags are often called carrier bags in some parts of the world? And speaking of bags, it's always a good idea to bring your own reusable bags to the supermarket. A reusable bag is a bag that can be used many times instead of being thrown away after just one use. They're usually made from strong materials, like cloth or canvas. By using reusable bags, we can help reduce waste and protect the environment. It's a small step, but it can make a big difference. And if you forget your reusable bags, don't worry. Many supermarkets offer paper bags, which are also a more sustainable option than plastic. Or you could even try bringing your own containers for things like fruits, vegetables, and bulk items. Now, here's an interesting fact. In some countries, like South Korea, it's common for customers to bag their own groceries. There's usually a separate counter where you can pack your items after paying, and in other places, like Ireland, you have to pay a small fee for each plastic bag you use. This encourages people to bring their own bags and helps reduce plastic waste. It looks like it's our turn at the checkout. Let's pay for our groceries and head out to the car. Great. We've paid for our groceries, and now we're heading out to the car, our reusable bags filled with all sorts of delicious things. As we load the bags into the car, we can feel a sense of accomplishment. We've successfully navigated the supermarket, found everything on our list, hopefully, and maybe even discovered some new items to try. And as we drive away, we can reflect on our trip. We learned about different sections of the supermarket, like the produce section, the bakery, and the deli counter. We also learned some useful vocabulary like aisle, checkout counter, and reusable bag. Can you remember what those words mean? Here's a quick true or false question to test your knowledge. It's always best to shop when the supermarket is very busy. What do you think? True or false? The answer is false. While it can be exciting to shop in a bustling supermarket, it's often easier and more enjoyable to go when it's less crowded. You can take your time, browse the aisles, without feeling rushed, and avoid long lines at the checkout. Well, that just about wraps up our trip to the supermarket. Thanks for joining me on this supermarket adventure today. I hope you learned some new vocabulary and picked up a few tips for your next shopping trip. Remember, grocery shopping doesn't have to be a chore. With a little planning, a positive attitude, and maybe a reusable bag or two, it can be a fun and rewarding experience. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What are your favorite things to buy at the supermarket? Do you have any funny or interesting grocery shopping stories to share? Maybe you once mistook a pineapple for a spiky green ball, or perhaps you had a memorable encounter with a friendly cashier. Let me know in the comments below. That's all for today's episode of English Unpacked. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.